Roy, you're the Dean of what? Business at UTS. Universities are going through a bit of a tough time at the moment. How do you stay resilient? You're on more committees and other things that I think I'm going to do in a lifetime. How do you keep it up?
Well, I think I stay resilient by not spending too much time in the university. Otherwise, I'd get a little depressed. It's a great disappointment to many of us that the current government started with such a reform agenda around education that was a central feature and ends up with a funding of education which per student is less than when they started. So with the efficiency dividend that was announced recently, we're all under a lot of pressure. As many of you will know, a lot of the funding for universities is generated by international students, and it's a very precarious situation to be in because the market can change. The dollar, of course, is a factor for us, and we have to really cross-subsidise much of what we do out of international full-fee paying students. We're in fact the third largest exporter in Australia. It's something we don't really publicise as much as we should. We should be a little bit more like the mining industry, I think, and make our case that education is the key to our future as an economy, and I think some of that will have emerged from Peter's analysis of productivity.
I promise you it wasn't a Dorothy Dix question. I didn't know you could. How do you personally stay resilient with all these things going on?
Oh, well, I enjoy the job. I really enjoy the diversity of the work that we do, the responsibility really of being in charge of 10,000 students who are next generation leaders for Australia. We're trying to introduce all sorts of new ideas and concepts that are going to be relevant basically to the people in this room. What kind of employability skills are required for the future? How do students envisage the future? We learn from them because many of them don't want to work for you. They want to create their own jobs. They want to work for themselves. They want to start their own ventures. So I'm constantly learning. I'm learning from my colleagues. I'm learning from business and the community. I'm learning from the students. And there's nothing like that constant pressure and interest to keep one occupied and resilient.
We're looking forward to learning from you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I guess the danger of following the chairman of the Productivity Commission is that there are very few graphs left that one can productively make use of. I'll do my best with a few and skip over some others. But I guess this one will now be familiar to you from the Treasury. Peter used it. Many of us use it, and for very good reason. And it's worth dwelling upon because it really summarises the predicament, I think we can call it that Australia faces. After a period of what can generously be called policy complacency, I think Paul Keating once used the term a decade ago, policy indolence. I can say that, Peter might not, because I'm not facing election in a few months' time. But what we see there on those last two bars is very indicative of the challenge that we face. The big blue bit in the penultimate bar is what Roscano and others have called the gift from China. It's added 15% to our national income. The grey section in the last bar is the gift from China. The blue section is the productivity contribution to the growth in our national income in the 1990s and now in the 2000s. What we now have to do is imagine that grey part of the last bar disappears, the gift from China, and even goes into reverse. Where are the new sources of growth in our economy? This has been described as the challenge of transition to a non-mining-led economy. Transition is perhaps a benign term. It's more like a potential disruption for which we're not adequately prepared because we have seen our labour productivity growth decline in the 2000s after being above world average in the 1990s, as Peter has indicated. And what we're left with now is a position where we're a high-cost economy as many of you will know, but not simply because of wages and inflation, largely because of our slowdown in productivity growth. Had we maintained the productivity growth of the 1990s, our unit labour costs, our real unit labour costs, would still be competitive. And we can get there. High-cost economies can be competitive if they address the productivity challenge. But we also have a massive decline in our multi-factor productivity, as Peter also pointed out, to some extent driven by three industries: mining, the utilities and agriculture, all for their own reasons. Very large inputs in the case of mining, but not commensurate output as yet. That will change. We are beginning to see a slight improvement in both our labour productivity and MFP, but nothing like what is required in the context of a high dollar, because that sets the bar even higher for our trade-exposed sectors. We have a position now where, even though terms of trade have declined, the dollar has not followed them down as it would have done in the 1980s, hence making our trade-exposed sectors automatically more competitive. What we face now is a very high bar for manufacturers, for tourism, for education, all of those that are exposed to international economic forces. Even if the dollar drops slightly, we can see here the competitiveness challenge, the decline in our competitiveness as measured by the blue line compared with the US and the euro area. This is our real exchange rate. And it's the issue that was tackled, and this is where we can come to some policy context, by the Prime Minister's Manufacturing Task Force last year, which was largely a response to the loss of over 100,000 jobs in our manufacturing industry over an 18-month period. There was a need for a reassessment of where manufacturing was going, how it would reposition in this new environment, which parts of manufacturing could no longer be sustained, which parts would be encouraged. And manufacturing does still matter for our economy, and it will matter more in the years ahead for a number of reasons. Three in particular: its contribution to R&D. It's about a quarter of the spending of R&D in Australia, generating skills that the economy needs, not just in manufacturing itself, but right across the economy, in telecommunications, in infrastructure. Manufacturing has historically and will be a driver of high-wage, high-productivity jobs, and it contributes to our external trade position by reducing our reliance on imports and therefore potentially on borrowing, which would expose us even more to international financial markets. If we look at Australia in comparison with the Nordic countries, say, in terms of the manufacturing presence that we have here, it's interesting that we have about the same population. We're land masses off the coast of an even larger land mass, in their case Europe, in our case Asia, China in particular. But the Nordic countries over the post-war period, even though they're high-cost economies, have built up 5 global manufacturing companies in the Fortune 500. We have none. We have mining companies, we have banks. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we are developing a new group of interesting manufacturing companies that we can call micro-multinationals, those that are becoming part of international supply chains, international production networks, companies like Ferra Engineering in Queensland, which is now Boeing's Global Supplier of the Year for the 787 Dreamliner. Out of 120,000 suppliers, we're good at manufacturing when we put our minds to it. We have companies that are the equivalent of the German Mittelstand. It's just that they're very fragmented and disconnected. We have Textor in Melbourne that many of you will know, Smart Fabrics for Kimberly-Clark. We have Hoffman Engineering in mining equipment in Perth, Clipsal, Codan in Adelaide, Siebel Furniture, exporting office furniture to China, manufactured in Australia. What's the distinguishing characteristic of that competitive advantage? Design and innovation. We have a microphone company that most people wouldn't even know was Australian, Rode in North Sydney. Extraordinary presence in international markets. We're there in manufacturing. It's just that we don't hear the good news. We only hear the bad. But the key to developing an effective, competitive, trade-exposed manufacturing sector as well as other parts of the economy is our investment in skills and education. And this was the key message of Australia in the Asian century. This will be our competitive advantage. This is what will drive productivity and innovation in a high-cost economy. But of course, we're lagging in terms of our expenditure as a proportion of GDP. This has been the case. These are the last figures we've got from 2004, but and the OECD has discontinued this time series, unfortunately, because it's an interesting one. It combines expenditure on higher education, on R&D, and on ICT as a kind of proxy for technological capability as a proportion of GDP. And we're not only lagging the Nordics here, we're lagging resource-rich countries which are our comparators like Canada, and those positions will not have changed in the last few years, despite the efforts of the present government and despite its very sincere commitment to doing so. Its commitment was encompassed in this document, Powering Ideas, which was Kim Carr's innovation agenda, a 10-year agenda, to change the way that we approach innovation in this country, that innovation isn't just expenditure on public research, which is where people have thought innovation took place. It's really a much wider concept. We need, in this context, to think of ourselves as a national innovation system, not a fragmented set of policies. We need to link up government, research, finance, and the level of the enterprise and the workplace in a more collaborative context. But the OECD numbers tell us that we're not very good at this. We're right down the bottom of the table when it comes to the intensity of collaboration between businesses and universities in Australia. Universities, I won't dwell on this slide, but universities have four basic functions. We train students, we add to the stock of codified knowledge, we do research, in other words, we do problem solving for industry, and we need to do more of that. This is a study of several universities around the world in a best practice context by MIT, and the interesting finding of this study was that there is a fourth area that universities also need to be engaged in, and that is providing public space. In other words, what are the contacts that universities can have? How can they engage with business, not just in a formal sense through technology commercialization, but also through a problem-solving, critical thinking context, a living lab context, bringing universities into business, bringing business into universities. I saw this very clearly in Germany late last year. We had a visit to one of our partner universities in the south of Germany, very small university, Furtwangen Hochschule, but in quite a rural area, surrounded by towns with small companies. This was the former clock-making area of Germany in the 17th and 18th centuries. It doesn't make clocks anymore, it makes surgical instruments. It only makes surgical instruments, nothing else, but they're the best surgical instruments in the world. Little boxes come out of these factories worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there is an ecosystem there between the university and those businesses, many of them family-run SMEs, but with huge wellspring of ingenuity and skill over generations. The students work in those companies, they do work experience, internships, the managers teach in the university, the local Fraunhofer Institute provides the technology foresight to understand where that industry is going to be in 10 years' time. This is the kind of way people think in these clusters, in these precincts, in these innovation hubs. These are the areas of what the Europeans call smart specialisation, an area that we need to occupy. But we can do this also through this area of engagement in public space. This is a survey of around 4,000 companies in the UK and US, and when they were asked where does their innovation come from, what do they think is most important in generating innovation, it wasn't so much commercialisation and technology, which still features on this list, informal contacts was right up the top. Informal contacts with universities, taking business out of its routine thinking, exposing it to new ideas, engaging academics with industry. This is the area that we haven't really exploited in Australia, using students as well to drive the creativity of our companies. We've had it now as a follow-up to all the policy committees and reviews and the Prime Minister's Manufacturing Task Force in particular, the plan for Australian jobs announced at the beginning of the year. A couple of the measures, sets of measures, are fairly unexceptional, nothing very new there. We need to make some adjustments to the new environment. We need to get Australian companies to participate more in resources projects. There was a lot of commitments around that and retraining. Economy-wide measures to boost productivity, improve our infrastructure, commit to sustainability. It's the last three areas that are real policy innovations and of interest, even though not terribly well specified at this stage, but areas of policy that I think we might hope will carry on irrespective of the government in office after September. The commitment and interest and also resources now allocated to innovation precincts like the one that I mentioned there around surgical instruments. Can we do that in Australia? Can we develop these innovation ecosystems? If we do so, they have to be industry-led. I think the problem with the government's current policy is that the work wasn't really done initially to understand where our future technological capabilities lie in Australia. What are the enabling technologies in which we can and already do have competitive advantage, and how do we build the precincts around those? It's a little bit less formal than that, the Innovation Precincts program, and so we've still got a lot to learn about how to implement such a policy, but it's a good start. And so is the emphasis on SME absorptive capacity. It's not just about how we pump out skills and pump out research, it's also what is the use that companies are making of these skills? How do we improve SME absorptive capacity? And how do we improve our workplace performance? And this is really the key to productivity improvement. How do we engage the talent and creativity of our workforces? The study that we were involved in a couple of years ago pointed the way in this area to some degree. We found, firstly, as part of this global study with the London School of Economics, that management practice is associated with improvement of management practice is associated with increases in productivity and output. This was a study conducted across 16 countries, including Australia. The outcomes were very similar in each country, except that we didn't do as well as many others. We did better than some, but not as well as the top tier performers. And if we're a high-cost economy, we have to be in that top tier in terms of our management capability. Currently, we're not. We're somewhere in the middle. And we found in this study, as in the other countries, better management is associated with large companies. Large companies tend to have the recruitment and staff development systems that smaller ones don't, but smaller ones can, and they certainly do in countries like Germany, Sweden, and others at the top of the table. Decision-making autonomy is a factor, but the major factor was the level of skills and education of managers, and we do have one of the lowest levels of qualifications of managers in the study out of the 16 countries. It is something, obviously we have a vested interest there as a university, but it is a factor, even though there are many exceptional managers who don't have formal qualifications. Statistically, they're the exception rather than the rule. And the area in which we lagged world best practice most was in people management. We're not too bad at operations and performance, but we had out of 18 metrics, one in particular that we lagged most. The blue bar is Australia, the red bar is world best practice, and it's this one that is the most worrying for us, that we lagged most in the area titled Instilling a Talent Mindset, which is, if you like, a proxy for innovation capability. It's this area of building innovation capability that will contribute to our productivity, contribute to our performance, contribute to our competitiveness as a country. It's the area in which we need to invest in the future. It's the area that has been identified in the Australia in the Asian Century report as the key area of the future to address the problems that we face, and which will identify a unique competitive advantage for us in the Asian context, where otherwise, if we simply produce commoditised production that can be offshored to anyone, we will not succeed. So that's it. Thank you.
I invite you to take a couple of minutes, just what's the essence of Roy's message, and what are some questions beginning to form in your own heads? Just have a 2-minute conversation.